Welcome back. This is session 10. And we're going to talk about care and transformation of your number. And at this point, my hope is that you've done a lot of good work. You've had a lot of chance to do it and a lot of information to work with. And I treasure the idea that you've created a community among yourselves and that you're adding new and really great things to the communities that you belong to. Jack Kornfield is one of my favorite writers, and he says, the unawakened mind tends to make war against the way things are. You know, we're really just not very aware. And there's a lot that we don't see from the limited view of our personalities. I wish I had that kind of poetic speech where I said things like, the unawakened mind tends to make war against the way things are. But that's just not me, so here's how I say it. It is what it is. And there's really no change in that. And it's much less poetic, but somehow it's a little more challenging, I think. So we have it cross-stitched and framed at our house so that I can look at it regularly and know, it just is what it is. During my time of teaching in this series, I've only had time for the telling of a few stories, and that's because we had so much material to cover, but boy, I love storytelling. And I hope I meet you somewhere someday, and then I get to tell you some of those stories. If you ever come to one of our events, or if you've heard me talk on other CDs that expand the topics that we've covered here, then you'll discover that I'm a seasoned storyteller and that I have a great love for a great story. Another of my favorite teachers is Jesus. And taken from the Peterson translation in the book of Matthew, Jesus says, the disciples came up and asked, why do you tell stories? And Jesus replied, you've been given insight into God's kingdom. You know how it works. Not everybody has this gift, this insight. It hasn't been given to them. Whenever someone has a ready heart for this, the insights and understanding flow freely. But if there is no readiness, any trace of receptivity soon disappears. That's why I tell stories, to create readiness, to nudge people toward receptive insight. In their present state, they can share till doomsday and not see it. Listen until they're blue in the face and not get it. When you and I see and hear everything through the lens and the filter of our personalities, we listen, but we don't always hear. And we pay attention, but we can't always clearly see. I've spent these weeks with you telling you the story of your personality, the common story that you share in number with so many other people who are your Enneagram number 2. And you're aware of the nuances of your personal story, which is different from this overall overriding story that defines us each in one of these 9 spaces. And I've told you these stories because I want to nudge you toward your own stories so that you can see and hear clearly. For me, the goal of our time together is so much more than giving you information. The purpose of my work is to assist people on the journey of transformation. But transformation is not merely change, and that's really a big piece. For me, change comes when you take on something new. You know, like you go to a retreat, and you think you'll never be the same, or you see a movie and then you tell all your friends they've got to see it. You read a book and say, this will change your life. Those kinds of changes usually last for a season or 2. And then if you're not careful, you're right back into the same pattern of behavior that's defined by your Enneagram number. But transformation is something different. And transformation usually occurs when something old falls away and you have no control over losing it. And I'm hoping that you're learning that you need to choose to allow some pieces of your personality to fall away so that the journey back to or forward to your essence will be a little bit easier. And I really can't talk about how you can take care of yourself and your number without talking about transformation. Because don't you see, if we do try to address the problems of our lives in our personalities, then we're just growing our personalities. And nothing good's going to come from that. Your personality is not you, remember, it's who you're not. And I so wish that this could be kind of an easy, tender session with you where I talk about care and transformation of your number. Doesn't that sound lovely? But instead, this one's really tough. And it requires honesty. And I'm going to offer you a lot of challenge. And you know that makes me nervous because I'm kind of tied up in wanting you to love me. So I got to risk all of that to tell you what I think is mine to say and to hope that you can hear what is yours to hear. Maybe sometimes we've always made talk about transformation sound too easy and too accessible. Maybe we've always made it sound like something that we could just step up to and do, and maybe that's why we don't stick with it very long. But once we begin the journey toward transformation in earnest, then we have to be willing to allow and we have to let go. Then life is both more adventurous and more painful and more peaceful, all of which is a beautiful paradox. So we're going to examine some truths about your number and some behavior about your number that's not necessarily becoming. Because most people have to get to that place before they're willing to admit that something has to change. You know people who don't change at all, don't you? And you know some people who only change when it's their idea. Some big changes happened in my life not too long ago, and they were outside what I would have wished could happen. And I don't do a lot of tweeting and Facebook posting, but I did post something on one of those two places that said, you know what I've discovered? I like change better when it's my idea. I got a lot of feedback for that. Seems that everybody likes change better when it's their idea. And transformation, well, it's necessary, but it's going to cost you something. But it costs so much more not to take the journey. So we're going to look at the truth of your number, and I'm going to give you some examples of bad behavior, and then I'm going to give you a couple of solutions and practices. One last hope that I want to share for each of you in your number before I do that is this. 2s, be aware that your love for someone will not change them. And 3s, unrealistic expectations of yourself are just not fair. And 4s, your feelings are not the best support for you, so try to stop giving them so much of your attention. 5s, you have an enormous gift in your way of understanding and perceiving. Use your energy now for developing the gift of compassion. 6s, be aware that your fears about others tell you not really about them. Those fears are telling you far more about you. 7s, try to always choose quality over quantity and practice being grateful for what is. 8s, let the people you know how important they are to you. 9s, know that your presence matters. It costs you way too much not to know that. And 1s, a person does not need to be perfect to be good. All right, here comes the hard stuff now that I've kind of mushed with you a little. All right, 2s. First of all, you don't recognize your own neediness. That's reality for you. And secondly, you don't want to explore the hidden motives that are behind your giving. And third, you have terrible boundaries. Your behavior looks something like this. When people ignore their needs and don't return affection to you, then you get angry and accusatory and abusive. And that's especially true when you're in a really unhealthy place of doing a lot of giving. And there are times in those scenarios when 2's behavior escalates to disproportionate levels. There are times when you just behave really badly. Those times are almost always about fear. So if you want to stop having those times, then start addressing those fears. And those times could include berating other people and excessive tears and rage. And behavior for you sometimes includes an overactive imagination. You know and I know because I'm one of you, boy, can we make up stories. And I also know that when you behave badly, you have enormous guilt that lasts for days and days. And then, after giving people the silent treatment, you overconnect. And it's very difficult for the people you love to handle all of that. So here are a few solutions and practices for you. You have to learn to recognize your own neediness and then address it in some healthy ways. So every morning, before you leave the house, on a piece of paper that you hang on the refrigerator, write down, I need something. It could be coffee to start with, but I hope you'll go a little deeper. Second, you must learn to be honest about your manipulation and then forgive yourself. And truly, you've got to learn that at the end of the day, everybody is responsible for themselves. Now, I know that's frightening, but it's true. You know, people really do love you for you. And I want you to get ready because you're not going to be able to take this in if you don't kind of hold on to your chair. Your needs are just as important as everybody else's. That's really hard for you to believe, but they are. So you must learn to fulfill your needs from the inside out rather than from the outside in. 3s. You really struggle when something happens in your life that exposes your vulnerability, like unexpected tragedy. Anything that you believe is crucial for existence and for your image. Unexpected rejection, unexpected and unexplainable disloyalty. And when that happens, you become very controlling. And if control doesn't work, then you get very depressed. And you use language like, I don't care, it doesn't matter that much. 3s are performers, and that's not always a good gift. I saw the best story ever a number of years ago on YouTube. There's a little girl, and her name was Savannah. And they only had the audio, which is an unusual thing for that piece of social media. And you hear this little girl talking to the 911 operator, and she says, "My daddy's on the floor, and I think he's had a heart attack, and I think you need to come right now." And then the operator says, "Can you tell if he's breathing?" "Yes, he is. He's breathing, but we need you to come right now." "Okay, well now I'm going to go, but I'll be back to the phone. I got to go change my clothes in the other room." And the operator says to her, No, Savannah. You stay right where you are. You need to stay right there on the phone and right there with your daddy." And she said, "Oh, I can't do that because y'all are coming and we still have on our jammies. I got to go get dressed." Now that's a 3 story. And that's adorable in a 5-year-old. But it's not so fun in a 35-year-old. And the stories that you're drawn to will be stories that teach you something about yourself. So you keep all that up of having to be ready for everything and dressed for everything and ready for every occasion and have the right image at the right time for all the right reasons, and you will create a monster. 3s want to be the center of attention, and that's okay. And sometimes they judge themselves too harshly. Now that's all reality, but here's some of the behavior that goes with that reality. Sometimes when they feel too vulnerable, they intimidate other people so that they can regain control. And at their very bottom, they have some self-destructive talk that's kind of scary. Or they engage in compulsive behavior like shopping or sleeping or working or plastic surgery, etc., etc., etc. 3s, you need to hear this as a solution and as a possible practice for you. Your real feelings are valuable, and sharing them is what will make every relationship better. Secondly, I can just almost guarantee you that people love you for who you are and not for what you do. Other people for sure are not judging you as harshly as you judge yourself, and it's really important that you know that. And finally, you really need to try to learn mutual intimacy. And that comes when you focus on other people while you're allowing yourself to be vulnerable. And that's so scary, it kind of takes your breath away. 4s, the reality is you're self-absorbed. And you have the perception that you're alone and that you're abandoned. And you have all this pressure at the same time to create some kind of exceptional life. That exceptional life is usually based on fantasy. You know, I got a question for you, and I really don't mean this to be judgmental or unfair, but think about the people in media these days who get an awful lot of attention, who have done and accomplished absolutely nothing. What's that about? I'm convinced that our new cultural addiction is fame. And little kids have it bad. And we're doing a lot of things to support that, and that's not good for 4s because it's fantasy. Then you try to have being different be enough, and of course it isn't. And then you get kind of enamored with your own way of seeing things. And you know everybody's capable of distorted seeing. And then when you really struggle, you just go over the top. And we want to follow you and go with you, but we can't. We don't know kind of where you went or how to communicate with you there. And when you get there, your anger is too prolonged. And you express your anger, but then you bury it. And it comes out in all kinds of crooked ways when you do that. Buried anger becomes depression in every number. 4s, you're overly dramatic. And you become defensive and walled off, and that pushes other people away. And you honestly know that you often are deliberately inconsolable. One of the keys is for you to find real, satisfying beauty in everyday life. And I know that you do not want me to say that to you ever again. And you've got to learn to grieve your losses and move on. 4s, you are lovable and you're enough. Creativity needs to be focused outward rather than inward. And you need to kind of take a rest from your own uniqueness by focusing on the uniqueness and the specialness of everybody else. Emotions replace feelings if you aren't really careful. So you're going to have to follow feelings all the way. And when you do, feelings have transformational value. So I'm going to teach you again from my tradition, which is the Christian tradition, from the Paschal Mystery, which is this, that the pattern for life is living and dying and rising. And some numbers are focused on living, and some numbers are focused on dying, and some are focused on rising. And we all have to focus on all three. And 4s, you got to get into the living and rising. All right, 5s, you spend way too much energy observing other people. You know, you don't believe that you have enough energy. Remember that? I taught you with this. You have this much every day and you run out. Well, stop wasting it observing other people. You need to accept that everybody needs other people, and you need to stay in the present moment, and you need to learn to say what you need. Hoarding is a reality for you, and I don't care if you ever confess that to another soul, but I want you to know that I know. And you're either hoarding time or money or energy or things or thoughts or knowledge or information. And I know that you deal with fear by detaching. And I know that when you're feeling particularly anxious, you retreat from social interaction. And I know, but you may not, that only increases your anxiety. Anger leads to several possibilities for you. Passive aggression, which means you just withhold more feelings than normal. And quiet rebellion, which means you just evade more than normal. And at your most extreme, you rage. My mom had the kitchen painted when I went away to college. And I came home and the kitchen was all a new color except for one little spot about this big on the ceiling. And I said to my mom, why didn't you paint over that little brown spot on the ceiling? And she said, I don't ever want to forget that day. She said, I just let it all loose and had a tantrum. and I slammed my hand on the table and it hit my spoon, and the oatmeal on my spoon went straight to the ceiling. And sometimes I look at it and think, atta girl. Now, every 5 has their story. You need to kind of let a little of that go before you're slamming oatmeal to the ceiling. Does that make sense? Some 5s become more obsessive, compulsive about anything. So, I want you to stop observing other people and start observing yourself. Because you cannot change behavior in yourself that you have not acknowledged. And you cannot acknowledge what you have not observed. And I want you to learn to allow other people to be supportive and nurturing. And I want you to take on a mantra for a while that says, everybody needs other people. Everybody needs other people. Everybody needs other people. My mantra is, not everybody needs me. You see, we could all have one. And here are your marching orders. 1, allow yourself to be seen and accepted for who you truly are. And here's how you do that. By being honest about what you feel and what you need and what you want. And you just have got to learn to connect your feelings to what's happening in real time. You cannot celebrate a holiday on Tuesday and not feel it till Friday, because you can't build relationships with people that way. So I want you to feel that right now. I've just told you some stuff that should make you feel miserable. I want you to feel it right now, in the moment. All right, 6s. Because you find it so difficult to trust, the reality is you protect your very best qualities. You save them for later. You save them for a safer time. 6s, you compartmentalize heart and mind and body, and you just deal with the world in your mind. And interestingly enough, I bet you 500 6s over the last 20 years have come up to me and said, you know, one thing I just can't get over is feeling like I'm responsible for what my parents did. Somehow I think I'm connected to the behavior problems of my parents. So since I've heard that from so many people, I'm telling you, you're not responsible for anything your parents did. Now, your behavior looks like this. If you have constant anxiety going, then you're either phobic and kind of paranoid, or you're belligerent and rebellious. And when you're afraid or when you're feeling threatened, you sometimes tend to question everybody about everything. And you try to protect yourself from blank, whatever it is, by shrinking from normal activities and pushing people away. And sometimes in order to do that, you have to be critical and confrontational. And you know what? 6 is scapegoat. Sometimes you just scapegoat other people. So I want you to remember that's not going to help you, because you can't fix what you can't acknowledge. So here's a practice or two for you. The key is this. The truth is, you cannot progress very far toward transformation unless you believe this. The world is absolutely full of good, trustworthy, honest people, and you can trust them. And you really cannot shine as you until you do. And it's in learning to trust other people that you learn to trust yourself. And staying in your head keeps you from feeling your feelings, so I want you to work with that, because if you can't feel your feelings, you can't have a holistic understanding of who you are. 7s, you spend very little time in the present moment, so you're probably not even present right now. And you're usually high energy, and you put a lot of energy into things that are not actually happening. Now, I know that in reality for you, patience is hard won and it's very fragile. And you and I both know that addictive behavior is either a problem for you, it's right on the edge of being a problem for you. And do you know why? Because you don't have any patience. If you could gain some patience, you could minimize some addictive behavior. And you're so alert for traps that might cause you despair. You're more caught in the thought pattern than you realize. You think about avoiding despair to a level that far exceeds the despair that you might experience during that time. And I'd like for you to be honest with yourself about the fact that you kind of have a need to be superior. Your behavior when you're not doing well is that sometimes you crash and burn, and when you do it loudly. And failures or even setbacks turn into trauma, exaggerated trauma with 7 energy. And big disappointments often lead to hostility, and then you get more confronting with other people. And when you get to that place, that 7 charm that we all love so much kind of disappears. And to others, it feels like the air's been sucked out of the room. And here, 7s sometimes walk away from job or school or a relationship or an event, and they feel justified in doing that when they're in this place. So here's a few practices for you. Self-reflection is critical. Always ask, what's my part in this problem? And then follow that with how you're going to work on it. 7s have to learn to stay in the present, don't forget that, and living in the present and fully conscious requires carefully sifting through the past and then letting it go. Don't relive it over and over and over. And you cannot achieve any real wholeness or health until you can own all of your personality. And you can only own all of your personality when you give up the need to feel superior. Because if you don't need to feel superior, then what is now ego can become self-esteem. 8s. You know what? The majority of the people in the world really do have good intentions, and they're not going to betray you. And you're going to have to learn to value listening to other people. And I want you to acknowledge to yourself, if not to anybody else, that you're relatively separated from your inner self. And you have an exaggerated stance of invulnerability. It's over the top. And I know and you know that sometimes you fake being strong. And when you're aware that you're faking being strong, that might be a good time to let somebody else share some of their strength. Your behavior is that you really struggle if you feel out of control. And if you feel threatened or vulnerable, then your strategies become very complex and frequently convoluted. Unhealthy 8s can be very aggressive and thoughtless and hurtful. And unhealthy 8s who feel vulnerable are unpredictable. And sometimes they make really, really bad decisions. And 8s you see are usually in a position of leadership. So when they make really, really bad decisions, it seldom affects just them. Here's some solutions for you, 8s. You have to learn to accept and believe that we all have weaknesses and we're all vulnerable. And you need to connect to your love and respect for yourself and for other people. And here's why. So you can hear other people tell you about their love for you. 8s say this to me all the time. You know, I get it that everybody respects me, but I want to be loved. Well, you have to allow that. People can't love you through all those defenses. The surest path to growth for you is listening. Listening, accepting, and honoring the suggestions of other people. And you must do your inner work. 9s, the reality is you just don't love yourself as much as you love other people. And you don't allow yourself the right to have your own thoughts and your own opinions and your own desires. Sometimes you're so passive that you literally fall asleep to your own life, and nobody can live it for you. Self-actualization is seldom achieved by 9s. I would think that would just make you spitting mad. Everybody wants to be self-actualized, so you got to buck up and want that too. And you have no idea that you're as important as everybody else is, but you know what? That works on you. Because I guarantee you, you have people in your life who are telling you how important you are to them. And your behavior, I would say, is that sometimes you use drugs or alcohol or sex or shopping or food to purposefully dull your mind, so you won't get caught standing up for anything or asking for anything that might cause conflict. And that approach of I'll get around to it often turns into blatant but soft-pedaled avoidance. And some 9s allow their lives to deteriorate into serious disarray because they are so passive and they're so unaccustomed to acting on their own behalf. And I know that you feel helpless at times, but you're not. You can do something about all of that. So here's what you got to do. Wake up and claim your life. And you really must learn to love yourself, and you need to quit thinking that you can love other people more than you can love you. And set some boundaries, for goodness sakes, and establish some priorities, and then stick to them. It's okay for you to have your own real desires, and it is not okay for you not to. So instead of surrendering yourself for the sake of peace, surrender peace for the sake of yourself. 1s, you're never going to experience self-actualization unless you're able to surrender this compulsive thing that you have for perfection. You are over-identified with rules and customs and tradition, and it makes it very hard for you to be unique, and you were created to be unique. You're so focused on perfection that you shun responsibility or scapegoat other people when things don't go well. And in relation to anger, remember that where you focus your anger is seldom what you're angry about. Your behavior when it's bad is disproportionate rage. And you usually behave that way at home and nowhere else. If you can control it enough to only do it at home, then you can control it enough to stop doing it there too. At your lowest level of your personality, there's a possibility that you're going to fall through a trap door. And I want you to really perk up and listen to this. There are a lot of ones in the world who have spent their lives preaching against excess wealth, pornography, gambling, alcoholism, etc. And they fall right into that trap. And they become what they've been preaching against. You got to really watch for that. And I'll just tell you, you're perfect enough as you are, so you need to embrace the reality that we're all in this together, and it's not up to you to handle everybody and everything. You have to learn to love yourself unconditionally. You deserve to be loved without doing anything special. And you need to cultivate uniqueness in place of cultivating perceived perfection. When I was in college, I had a poster that was hanging in my room. And it was this caricature that came in cartoons and on greeting cards in those days. And I think her name was Patty. I can't remember that part. And in the poster, the front half of her body has gone through the ringers of an old wringer washing machine. So it's flat. And the back half of her body is not flat. You got the image? She's halfway through, and at the bottom it says this: the truth will set you free, but first it will make you miserable. And it's my goal in this module to set you free. But in order to do it, I had to make you miserable first. Thank you for allowing me that.
My favorite way to take care of myself and transform my personality is to stick to my number and try to do it the best way I can. And I find that hanging with friends that are on the same journey that I'm on help give me guidance and counsel when I'm having a tough time. Secondly, I think when I get really, really busy and take on too much, I am much more aware of that, and I have to settle myself quietly and let that resentment go that I'm not getting the help I need. And lastly, this little voice that lives with me, I have named that little voice, and her name is Frida. Free-duh. When Frida really gets to spitting it out, I have to just tell her to shut up. And in that divorce, it helps me find peace.
As a 2, I can so easily fall back into taking care of everybody's needs, trying to help everybody. I can help people that don't even want my help. It's pretty amazing. But what I've learned how to take care of myself is I learned exactly what Suzanne always said, is always, always, always ask myself, is it mine to do? And most of the time when I ask that question, it's really not mine to do at all. And I also stop and think, which is also hard for me to do as a 2, but I try to stop and think about, is it, by me doing something for someone, am I taking away their opportunity to learn what they need to learn? And that's real important. So I've really changed my life as far as constantly helping people and taking care of their needs. I still have a problem with figuring out what I need, and that's going to take some time. I'm not sure how to do that yet, but we just keep working to strive to be the best.
So to care for myself as a 3, for me personally, the easiest way to do that is to really engage in practices that connect with my body. So I've found that yoga, taking my dog for a walk and just kind of noticing the colors that are around me, enjoying like a really tasty meal and sitting there and choosing to not check my emails on my phone or read something, but really be present to the food nourishes me on a lot of different levels. I've also found that a day of rest, like once a week, and scheduling that and being really committed to it makes a very radical difference for me. It kind of stretches everything out, and I feel like I can breathe and re-engage with my life in a more natural way. And then I'd say that the other way that for me to take care of myself is with meditation. And I've noticed something interesting, that when I stop and I'm still, I can actually feel, as I have thoughts go by, this desire to get up. Like I feel this charge come through my body to go forward and to do something. And so I try to breathe into my back and just notice that what it feels like to sit and to be still. So those are some ways that I take care of myself.
As a 4 on the Enneagram, I tend to get caught up in a cycle of having strong emotions and then thinking about those feelings and then having even stronger feelings. To transform out of that endless cycle, I really need to be more grounded and to pay attention to the mundane things that need to get done in my life. If I'm going to be the creative person who makes a difference in the world that I want to be, then I need to wash the dishes every day, keep the laundry done, pay attention to cleaning the house, and do a meditation every day. And then I will be a transformed 4, or at least closer to that than I am now.
As a 5, my natural tendency is to want to find a quiet place, read a book. And I will probably do that naturally, and probably most every 5 will. It's probably not the thing that I want to latch on to in search of becoming a healthier person. It's probably better for me to wake up early before I've talked to anyone or interacted with anything. Ask myself a few questions. Maybe questions like, what am I feeling? What do I need to do today? And try to bring up those things that are suppressed. Bring up doing, bring up feeling. And I've experienced a lot of transformation through just that simple practice.
As a 6, I tend to self-doubt and worst case scenario everything. And when I find myself in this situation, I literally ask myself, what is the worst thing that can happen? For example, I was recently asked to teach a Bible study class, which for me is way out of my comfort zone. And I asked myself, what is the worst thing? And I came up with, somebody might tell you you're wrong, you might learn something, and I became more comfortable with it. Also, when I'm in a situation where I'm feeling not safe or nervous, I remind myself that most things are out of my control, so I just need to sit back and be in the present, be in the moment at the time.
So why would I want to transform? I guess that's the question I would ask as a 7 is, why would I want to change my personality or transform my personality? I like the way I am. I like my personality. And there's probably 7s and even others who feel that way as well. So if I'm gonna decide that would make my life better, then the way I would do it, though, is to think about it as a grand adventure that I'm going to sort of create and discover how much a new kind of being, a new way of being me that can come to be a part of my life.
As an 8, I need to do some things to counter my aggressive nature. And one of those things is that I do is yoga. Every day, I try every day to do 30 minutes or 45 minutes of yoga stretching. And that allows me to do some thinking and to get relaxed, which is hard for 8s to do. And I also need, in addition to that, I need something to allow me to release my aggressive nature and in a constructive way. And I do that through sports. I play tennis at least twice a week. That way I can be aggressive and not hurt anybody.
The best way that I've found to take care of myself is through journaling. I've actually journaled my entire life, and I may have just intuitively known that that has been beneficial for me. But the more work that I've done, the more benefit that I found in it. I found that it truly is the best way for me to reflect on what it is that I truly think about a situation or feel about a situation, what it is that is mine to do, so that I can move forward and be more present to my own life and in the world around me.